maid of honor conned me and a family member with dementia on my wedding day, and in part one, I talked about how in 2019, I received a call from my maid of honor, Crystal. She told me that some family members were accusing her of stealing money from this elderly family member who I am going to call Susan. And Crystal was in charge of Susan's money and at one point had been living with her. So what she was explaining was that all the family members just didn't understand that she was putting the bills on the credit card, and that is why it was so high. And she did admit to the fact that she had gone on a few shopping sprees, but it was because Susan told her to. And Susan was a very generous person, so that felt like something that would happen because Susan was like that. So that is all I ever heard. No other family members ever told me what actually happened because I was out of state, and I think that maybe they were just trying to protect my feelings. So that is all I heard, and she was cut off from Susan. Or at least she was financially. She would still show up, and it didn't seem like Susan was upset with her. Susan's husband was very upset with her, but not necessarily Susan. So that was another thing in my mind where I kind of thought maybe this was a giant misunderstanding, and she did acknowledge that this was a lapse in judgment. And now we are going to flash forward because I ended up getting divorced from my ex because of the Walt Disney World burger. And I had called Crystal and told her what had happened because my ex had assaulted me, and it was a very scary situation that I needed to make a safety plan to get away from. And Crystal actually told me that I owed my ex-husband a sit-down conversation for closure, which was insane. So while I am leaving this very abusive marriage and trying to just get to safety, she is telling me that I owe this to him, and that was just very painful. But we did end up getting divorced, and then I ended up meeting my now husband, Brandon. After a couple years of dating, Brandon proposes, and I asked Crystal to be my maid of honor. And she was a great maid of honor. Like I said, she loved to throw parties. She was very extravagant. She ended up throwing us a surprise Harry Potter engagement party that was super intricate and beautiful. So she was very good at making you feel very special. And a lot of these events took place at Susan's house because when Susan and her husband built their home, their entire vision was to host people. That is what they wanted. They wanted it to be the place where all family could come and gather for holidays. And if you go back and look at my wedding photos, we actually did get married in their backyard. So it was just a very special place for us all. So yeah, a lot of the events of this took place at that house. A house that Crystal has now trashed, which we will get into that later. So during our engagement, Susan's husband ended up passing away, which was so incredibly hard, and me and my husband did a lot of the caretaking for him towards the end of his life, and it was all a hands-on deck kind of thing. So while all of this is going on, Crystal is there a lot of the time, as are a lot of different people in this circle. So Crystal ends up telling me that she wants to move in with Susan, and that she would love to come and take care of Susan again because now that Susan's husband is no longer here, she does need more care, and her dementia was getting a lot worse. And that's actually something my husband and I were talking about at the time, is if we should move in with Susan to take care of her, and it was something that we really wanted to do. But Crystal ended up kind of like throwing her hat in the ring and saying that she really wanted to be the one to come in and move in with her husband and her children because they lived a few hours away. So she kind of pitched it to where, don't you want me to come back and live in the same city? We can see each other all the time, and I've taken care of Susan before. I've lived with her before. And this was a big ask because of everything that had happened in 2019. She was really nervous to pitch this to the family members who had accused her of stealing, but she told them that she promised that she would be transparent with the money and that they could see every single receipt. She pinky promised that nothing bad would ever happen again. And the family member that accused her was able to talk to Susan's husband before he passed away and got his blessing for this. So while the family member who accused Crystal and knew the backstory didn't love this, they felt like their hands were tied because everybody else was saying that this was such a good idea. And Crystal would cry to me and tell me that she felt so much shame about the past. And I was kind of confused because I was like, you don't need to worry. She was worried about going to the funeral. She ended up giving a eulogy, and she said, I'm really worried about going to the funeral and that everybody's going to judge me and think that I shouldn't be giving a eulogy at this funeral. And I was like, everybody knows that you're amazing. Everybody knows that you never did anything wrong on purpose, because I obviously am still thinking that she just went on a shopping spree to Dillard's. So it ends up being decided that Crystal and her family can move back in with Susan. And that's where I'm gonna end this part. So follow for the next part, and I will talk about the Bachelorette. There was a con on the Bachelorette that I didn't find out about until later, and what happened on the wedding day.